Lily, it is so wonderful to have you. And I'm just going to pause and tell our audience that when we first met, it was like it clicked. We thought we were just being introduced to each other for a moment, and we've been together for decades. So I'm so excited that you are here with us today. And I can't wait for the audience to hear about this quantum faith. I mean, this work that you're doing is groundbreaking and it's really interesting. So, please tell us about your background and what led you into this arena of quantum faith.
It's one of those things that we say are supernatural. And I'll tell you, um, early in, I want to say 2020, 2019, I was contacted by a dear friend of mine, Dr. Timothy Akers. Now he's in San Bernardino University, but he was over the innovation at Morgan State University and HBCU. And he was putting forth a proposal that was all about empowering national literacy in quantum arena. And I said, "What's quantum?" And he was talking to me about quantum. And I'm like, "Okay, I've worked with you for 6 or 7 years, putting STEM together at the university, empowering young people, but I have no clue what quantum is." But because he's a friend and because, we got to pray about certain things, I said to him, and I didn't, my thing was I was going to tell him an immediate no, but somehow I was grabbed and I said, "Give me a few days. I'm not going to say no yet, and I'll think about it and get back to you." So the next day, I'm at home working on my computer. And my mom is like, "Oh, I need you to once again." This book came out in the 70s. It's called God's Creative Power
Okay.
by, what's his name? Charles Capps. "I need you to just read it again. It's just so powerful. The word that you say, and life and death is in the power." She's so excited. Okay, it's a little tiny pamphlet book. And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna read it." You know how we, honor your parents.
That's
So I
right.
said, "Mom, I will do that." And so I'm reading this book and I find myself doing something different. I never go to the back of a book that says, the person's bio and their recommendations and everything else. And Charles Capps has a daughter, Annette Capps. You see this? That wrote the book Quantum Faith. And
Okay.
that's what it says in this little pamphlet. So I'm like, quantum faith, Christianity. So immediately I ordered the book, had it the next day, and that was it. I had to call him back and say, "It is clear that nothing is by accident. It is divinity working again and again in our lives. And I will join with you to be, one of these investigators on developing a quantum initiative for the National Science Foundation." And
Wow.
that's how I got involved. No, I didn't have any quantums, mechanics, entanglement, all of that. Didn't even know what it was until I got engaged. But what I did know is that God was telling me to be engaged.
Amen. Amen. And so Lily, I remember, I think it was right around this time that you were like, Andrea, you have to read Quantum Prayers. Was that the name of the book, Quantum Prayers?
That was
Yeah.
several years later. And it was another author that was doing quantum prayers, quantum faith. And I was like, "Okay, this resonates." And it just was this again and again, a to me, it was where science was meeting faith.
Yes.
And that science was finally catching up to the fact of who Christ was, who Christ is, and who Christ is going to be in our lives, the future, past, and present. And that's what it was doing. And when you look at quantum, you say, "Okay, this explains in a Christ-like manner the Big Bang Theory."
Mm,
Quantum is not, one of the things about what we call traditional physics is, one plus one equals two. It doesn't happen with quantum. There are so many variables that can be done in a simple equation. one of which is something called the Schroeder's cat, which I love talking
Yes.
about
Yes.
because that is, it only, it changes when you look at it.
Right.
To me, once again, it's about faith. If we're not focused on that answer, it doesn't come. And so it started really talking to me about the relationship God has with us. I love that entanglement.
Mm,
That, that's one of the main premises of quantum, how we're entangled. And once you're entangled, it doesn't matter if you're in a supernova, galaxies away, it doesn't matter. You're entangled. And then we talk about superpositioning. When one turns, the other turn. Think about it. When God turns you, do you turn with him? That,
mm,
that kind of thing. So all of those concepts, and it talked about light, you
hmm.
know, being the fastest communication transmission. And what did the Bible say in Genesis? Let there
There
be
be light.
light. So
Yes.
it was talk about kicking the tires out for those people that said, okay, you know, this is how man evolved and everything. Well, quantum doesn't follow those things. And that's why I believe right now is becoming such a challenge. Everybody wants to, the leaders of these countries want to get into the quantum space, but the real challenge is they're going traditionally.
Right.
And God is not traditional. We know God does things the ordinary. And so one of the things that excites me being in this space and just as I say, coaching folks to come into the space and sit in the space is because you don't have the answers, you're listening. You don't have fixed beliefs that
Right.
cause you to act a certain way. You just don't know. And God is always answering questions when people just say, I need help. I don't know.
Well, this is such good stuff. So one of the things that I read in that book that you recommended for me was this concept of hopping a cliff. I just like that. It just sounds different and funny from what we all are used to. But what I have noticed in my life is it's almost the same of like when you observe it, it comes into being kind of thing. And what I have observed in my life is that things do pop up, things that were not sitting there before. I come back and it's there. And I know that sounds crazy. It has happened to me so many times. My daughter and I talk about simulation, how like the simulation readjusted. And that I think is what it's all about. There's something going on that we in our humanness don't really get, but if we let go and let God, if we really trust and if we have faith, we start to see things that some people might call it a miracle, some people might call it magic, some people might call it supernatural, but it's definitely not normal. What do you say? What do you say about that?
Well, I agree. What I love about what's happening in in multiple industries. You notice the entertainment industry, the
Hmm.
whole Marvel, the Black Panthers, all the movies, the series, the end game and everything else. They all have a premise of quantum.
Hmm.
And when you see Doctor Who doing his thing and saying there are a billion possibilities, and he comes to him and says, is there one that we win? And he says, there is. But out of a billion, one that wins. And that's, to me, I get the Holy Ghost, oh, the Spirit all over me because there are a billion possibilities, but there is one that we win. And it's
Hmm.
putting your laser focus on taking out of that dimension because we know we're in multiple dimensions, taking that dimension and bringing it into the earthly dimension. One of the
Hmm.
things I love, Elijah, when they're surrounded and his servant is like they're surrounded by the enemy and the servant is so upset and it's like we're going to die. And Elisha says to his servant, open his eyes. And when he opens his eyes, he sees the next
Realm.
dimension.
Yes.
And in that
Yes.
dimension, he sees the warring angels and the chariots that's surrounding them. And that gives him the confidence to know they'll win. But think about it, the prophet was already in that dimension.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
for
our
me,
job to open people's eyes so they get in that
absolutely.
dimension.
Absolutely. For me, the funny thing is it already exists. We just don't see it. And once we get our
Correct.
eyes open, we can see what's already there. All right. I want to step back just a little bit because I don't want to miss this. So, this program really is about faith and purpose, which is why I was so excited to chat with you because I want to know what is your purpose and how did you come to figure out what that was?
Okay, one of the things that I recently put on my phone as a screensaver, and it looks kind of distorted or whatever, but it's important. It doesn't, and maybe it's distorted because that's what happens with us.
Hmm.
Um, the verse from Psalms, a lamp unto my feet.
Mm,
And what I really encourage folks when they call me is to say that God says, I'll be a lamp unto your feet. He didn't say a boom light, He didn't say you'd see everything, but as you walk, because that lamp unto your feet is in movement as you
right.
walk.
That's
There are
right.
so many, there's so many places in the Bible that the miracle happened as you moved into it. You know, as they stepped into the river, it parted. And
Yep.
so, what my encouragement is in the business community, in the marketplace, as we call it, first of all, there'll be a point where you get an urgency to do something.
Mhm.
And or it will just come to you and like this doesn't make sense. Why are you telling me about a restaurant? Why are you telling me about some art collection? Why are you telling me? And you take that moment to sit in it. And then things start percolating all around you.
Mhm.
And you feel like I need to go here or I need to, just an event. It's like, I'm just feeling that. Those are that lamp unto your feet. And I believe that we don't have the answers until we walk into
Mhm.
it. And each step opens up
Mhm.
another door. And the thing that I I have always said is we talk about the door and the
Mhm.
lock.
Mhm.
The lock's on the other side.
That's right.
It's not on our side. We just got to push the door open.
Mhm.
And so people keep on saying, well, bang and whatever. No, your doors are ready for you to walk through. And so those are the kinds of things that I am constantly sharing to empower folks to get started.
Mhm.
And the other part about me is one of the things that God has been working on, cleaning me up in, is this need to be perfect.
Oh my
There
goodness.
are there are too many of our saints that don't start a business, don't do something because I need to be prepared. I need more. My book isn't right. This isn't right. It's like, oh Lord, every day I thank Him for working on me in that area because perfection will stop you, it will freeze you, it will, all the gifts that you have will end up being buried, as Miles Monroe would say in his books, in the cemetery.
That's right. That's right. All
So those are the types of things. Yeah, you do need to do some preparation,
right.
but the kinds of preparation folks like me do is just ridiculous. Yes.
All right. So, this is all so wonderful. I want to talk about how your faith influences your work. So, quantum faith is one thing, but I want to hear about your personal faith and how it influences your work, your values, and the strategic decisions that you make.
I'm going to talk about something that happened to me probably a couple of months ago.
Hmm.
Uh, because one of the things that I love talking about is some recent things because a lot of times people say, okay, they're a prayer warrior, they don't go through struggles, that's in the past or whatever. But as I've heard somebody says, new levels, new devils. And
Absolutely.
so there are things that you think you've overcome or whatever, but it comes at you in a different way. So I had the opportunity, I call our challenges opportunities, um, to be reviewing a proposal I won't say a proposal, an RFP that was put out. And I read it over, got my inner court to go over it and realized that this was not something we would be qualified to go after. And what was important about that is during that same period of time, my Sunday school studies were out of Ecclesiastics, not chasing the wind. And so I remember putting in my journal, I will not chase the wind. That grace and gratitude come my way. I will not
Wow.
chase it. And so that meant that I requirements and line them up to what did God call me to do? And is this outside of that boundary? And so one of the individuals that was part of, I'll call it the community, really got angry with me
Mm,
because how dare I not go after this? This is something we worked on and this and this and this, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this and whatever. And what I did in that scenario is I said, okay, God, I mean, I was upset because I'm like, are you telling me, are you going to make me do this? And I had to step back and say, go to my advisors and just basically go to rules and regulations, put them, and they all came back and said, we're not going after this. Now, I was annoyed that it took my energy off of it for a day. I was annoyed that I just felt like I was somebody was trying to push something or control. But what I had to do was, like Nehemiah, you knew what you're supposed to do, and you're going to
right.
stand on this, and you're not going to allow individuals, because it would be easy to say, oh, you're going to do it. Let me just, you said you're going to do the heavy lifting. Let me put my name on it, or whatever.
Hmm.
I knew it was wrong. I knew it was
Wow.
wrong. It wasn't the thing to do. And there are going to be times, and I like that concept of chasing the wind, especially in the marketplace, where somebody's going to say, oh, you should be, instead of coaching this, you should be consulting this, and there's no money over here. Da, 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 da. And you're going to go, am I chasing the money or am I
Right.
doing what God called me to do?
I love what you're talking about, Lily, because I think a lot of times the world tells us go for the big deal, go for the money, go for the big win. And it forgets that that might not be what God has called us to. And I know for a fact that whatever God has called us to, He's going to bless us in it. But if we listen to what the world is saying, if we listen to what other people are saying, we can get caught up. And so when you had that situation where you knew what it was that you were supposed to be doing, but somebody else, a person, not God, but a person came to you and was upset with you. The humanness in us, the fallible side of us could say, oh my God, I let that person down. Let me go ahead and do it anyway. I don't want to let them down. But sometimes we have to stand our ground. And as I mature, I was going to say as I get older, as I mature, what I'm realizing that no is a full sentence, and sometimes we can just say
Mm,
no. And so
amen.
that is something that I'm getting from what you're saying. Let me ask you, in your work, what impact are you hoping to make?
I'm going to pull this into what we were talking about. The impact is to understand your motives. I
Hmm.
mean, always going back to the motives. What are your motives? Is your motives to help? Is your motives to create legacy? Is your motives that align with the word of God? What are your motives? That's the impact. I'm always saying to people that says, well, Lily, you could do. I said, that is not mine to do. I'm I have had to work on myself on a daily basis not to stick my hands in stuff, but to say, you have, I will come alongside you,
Yeah.
but what are you being told to do? I think that when I look at this, I really want to be um, a facilitator.
Mm,
I talk about being a catalyst. A
Hmm.
catalyst assumes you already have the content. All I'm doing is helping you express it and move
Yep.
it faster and faster. I want to be, part of the Leapster group, leaping forward. I want to be the person that builds your confidence in where you're going. And even when it feels like no one else is going there, to say, did God call you? Yes, go.
You know, Lily, what you're reminding me of is this thing where we have a tendency to work in areas where we shouldn't be or stay too long in a place that we shouldn't be. And I'm curious, do you have any stories or experiences where maybe you were in a place like that and God called you out and maybe when he called you out, because I'm sure a lot of our women who are starting off will feel this way. When he called you out, it didn't even look like success at first, but sticking with it and staying the course and doing what God is calling you to do always leads to um, provision, prosperity, profit, whatever you want to call it. Any stories or any thoughts that you have about that concept?
Well, what's really funny and why I laughed is on Sunday, I'm sitting in a restaurant with a friend of mine, my mom's birthday. We had gone to after going to this theater and HBC event, we went to a beautiful restaurant. And while we're there, she gets a phone call, and the person wanted to know if I would do a spoken word on Saturday. And so she hands me the phone and says, and I'm saying, who is this? Or what's going on? So somehow my name was socialized, but nobody called me to tell me they needed me to do this on Saturday at church. But I say that to say because I was writing on, I took three of my blogs that I had done, pulled them out, and then said, let me look at them, out of the 400, let me look at them and really make it relevant and make sure I have something in the spoken word that really works for it towards that because I don't consider myself a spoken word person, but that's God. So, what was interesting, the one I chose was uncomfortable, unqualified. And so, the first thing that is going to happen, and it has happened to me again and again, is being uncomfortable. It's like you're doing something, you're working hard, and you're uncomfortable. It's just not giving you what you think it should. You're except the Lord build the house, you labor in vain. I mean, you are putting forth proposal, things that should be happening, and it's not. And you're like, what's going on? I think that's going to be an important revelation. We talk about metrics and project management. Well, if you're building something and it's not working, maybe you shouldn't be building it.
It's
And
interesting.
yeah, yeah. And it could be, as they say, the resources you're building it with. Are you building it with the right people?
Hmm.
Did God tell you to go and you drag some other people like Lot in them? What
Yep.
what what are you doing? It's like that reflection. And then, of course, the thing that always will happen along your journey, and I say always, I would say 95% of us have had this feeling of unqualified.
Mm.
It's like, oh, there's something over there, but I don't have this experience. I don't have that experience. I don't have that money. I don't have those contacts and that feeling of unqualified. And I believe that uncomfortable and unqualified is that moment of pressing into God and saying, do I go? And when you get that answer, just like Abraham, you go, not knowing where you're going, lamp unto the feet, but you go. And for me, it happened, I had been at a company for over a decade
Mm.
and things weren't working. And things weren't working. And I I knew that the landscape was changing, that the Spirit of God, how we say we'll rest on something, wasn't resting on it anymore. But I was going to make it rest on it because I was staying
Mm.
there. And
Hmm.
when it was time, I had to go.
Mm.
And part of what allowed me to make that move was I had gotten back from a cruise and my sisters made me commit to going into therapy. And I said, and I said yes. It was just before COVID. And what I did was do a simple search. I wanted an African American woman. I wanted somebody that was Christian based and in the business arena. I put that into a, it wasn't, somebody will say, well, where did you search that? I just put it, and I needed it local, of course. And
Right.
three companies popped up. I left a message with one. I left a message with the second one. By the time I was ready to call the third one, because I keep my word with my family, the person had called me back, and that has been a journey of love. She
Oh, wow.
had my background. What was amazing about it is she was a first generation. Her parents were Caribbean. She had been a lawyer only because, doctor and lawyer kind of Indian chief kind of mentality. And she said, I didn't like it. Yes, I excelled in it, but I didn't like it. I had always wanted to be a therapist. And so I had someone that mirrored the kinds of journey that I was in of doing things because of family culture as opposed to what you really enjoy.
Right.
And from that, I was able to break the strongholds of staying in a tech job because it was great money and everything else, but it wasn't giving you the love that you needed to have, that joy, that peace. I tell people, working hard is no problem, but you need to be working hard with purpose.
Wow. Yeah, I think somebody really needs to hear that. I know in my own journey, I have been in a lot of situations where I was good at what I did, but I didn't love it. That was okay because it was making money. But you know what? At some point, God calls you out of that, and it's not enough that you're making money. Being on purpose and walking in purpose is far more fulfilling. And dare I say, at the end of the day, God provides for us. He always has and he always
He
will. So I'm
does.
not
He
so much
does.
worried about the money, but what I don't want is to get to the end of this journey and hear, anything but, well done, my good and faithful servant. That's what I need to hear. And that's why, purpose for me is such a huge thing. And I don't know if it's because I don't know what chapter. I don't want to say this is the last chapter, but this is one of those chapters where I've had many chapters before. But in these later chapters, let's call it, I feel this urge to really focus on what God is calling me to do. And I'm wondering, are you getting that same urge? And do you think women who have had these like lucrative careers and sat on boards and were executives and things like that, get to a point in their career where it's like, you know what, that's all well and good, but I have another call and I have to live through that call. What do you think?
I think that's happening more and more. One of the things I tell people, they say, "Oh, when are you going to retire?" When I get to heaven, because we're meant to have multiple chapters. We're meant to inspire. We're meant to have the lessons learned. We're meant to make an impact
Mm,
every single day. It is not an
hmm.
impact for yesterday or the year before. You know how you say you see the person in the club that's been there and they're now 50 years old dancing away and talking about what they did before.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm in Jesus Club and I'm going to be talking about what I did today, how
Amen.
I how I walked into a grocery store and said to somebody, "Good morning, how are you doing?" And I looked them in their eyes and I waited for a real answer,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
the "I'm okay." And you look at them and say, "Are you sure you're okay?" And you read their name tag and you say, "Mary, are you sure you're okay?" And you hear the
Yeah.
And that's the part. We want to be a light. We want to be, God is a light unto our path, but we need to be that light unto somebody else's path.
Hmm.
One of the things I said to somebody um, on Saturday when the whole event for the celebration for mom, and I gave him a financial gift, and he says, "No, you don't have to do that." And I looked him in his eyes and I said, "Do you ever tell God you don't need to bless me anymore? I got enough." And he started smiling and said, "Just give me a hug." But that's the life we have to live.
Yeah,
Where
absolutely.
yes, we're blessed to be a blessing. And part of that is if we're in an environment and it's not working, step out of it for a moment, reflect on it. And even if it means sitting your derriere down for a moment because you're not sure what to do next, that's all right. You're at the stoplight. It's all right to pause.
You know, Lily, I was going to ask you this next question, and I think it's apropos. I know you to be one of the most giving people that I know. And I can share stories of how you've given to people who knew me because they knew me and they were in need. So I know that you definitely have the gift of giving. I was going to ask you about your number one success factor. Do you think it's related to giving, or is there something else that stands out to you that drives your success?
I think it's giving. I really do. You know, like say grace and giving. I wrote that down just even last week because it's that, my favorite Isaiah 40, they that wait upon the Lord, it's that waiting, it's that serving. And I get joy out of serving. I really
Mhm.
do. And and I know it doesn't make sense to some people because they're like, you're spending so much hours volunteering or doing this or doing that. But it's the joy of service. One of the things I did last year, and I'm seeing the fruits of it, is we had a writing seminar at our church, and we did it not only at location, but virtual every other week or what have you. And individuals, at least one of them has published their book, their cookbook. She's now sending the second one to the publisher. Another one is working on publishing. I have three that are working on publishing their books. And the biggest thing was get going, do it. And these are individuals that had this for 5, 10 years that
Mm,
had the call but didn't, it wasn't sure. And to me, the gift that I felt was letting them know that it was okay to do it and it was okay to do it not perfectly. The
mhm.
gift of one of the things that Freeman Hrabowski, who used to be the president of UMBC, when I interviewed him, said, fail fast. The gift of telling people it's all right to fail, but and what you learn from it, but to get up. I think a lot of people I talk to don't go into business because they're afraid of failing.
Mm,
And because
absolutely.
they're afraid of failing, they're much like, and when they say it, I often smile because you think of a servant.
Mhm.
I Lord, I buried it because I knew you were a hard taskmaster. And that's what they're doing. And what did he call them? That part of the Bible continues to just haunt me. You wicked. That's the only time he calls somebody wicked. You wicked servant. Um, when you're afraid of failing and you don't do something, you're being a wicked servant.
Wow. That's a tough word, but I think it's a word that we need to hear. Lily, that advice is I think it's really important for us to hear something like that. I was going to ask you specifically, what would you say to women who are called to step out in faith and to pursue their God-given purpose? What else would you say to them?
I would also add that in this journey, the most exciting part is making sure you have that village,
I
the
love that.
village of trusted
Hmm.
advisors.
Hmm.
And here's the thing, you can't trust without testing. People
Hmm.
want to go, oh, I trusted them, whatever. No, you go through the
Hmm.
test. They go through the fire with you, what have you. So as you're moving along, whether you're in the marketplace or been called to be in law enforcement or whatever you're called to do, you need to have a village of trusted advisors,
Yeah.
ones that will say, uh, Lily, you're spinning. Get back to the writing. Lily, that's great. I've read it and it's right on target. You need ones that are going to say the good, the bad, the ugly,
Yep.
and ones that you can be naked and not ashamed of.
Hmm.
Because yes, you're having a pity party and you invite them and they hear it and then say party over. But they've heard what you said and they say, you know, me too. I had that kind of party also. But now that you've had your party, dust yourself off, Lily, and keep it going. Those having that village and and really being willing to reach out to some people. You know, say to them, "Hey, I'm looking at a time where I really want to have some trusted advisors.
Hmm.
Can we get together and talk and let's see if we gel together? And maybe
Hmm.
you already have it. Use them.
Right. Wow. So good counsel, trusted advisors, accountability partners, people you can depend on, and dare I say, Lily, be that for somebody else as well.
Yes, yes. And know that
Absolutely.
some of them are not going to be there for the long haul, but they're there for a period that you need them. And that's all right. That is all right. You know, there's no need to be angry or upset, but they got you up one hill and you're
Yeah.
saying thank you for that. And now you're about to move on to another hill or another mountain. And it may need some new advisors for that. I always tell people about coaches, it says, I'm not going to get a coach about losing weight that's never experienced the joy of being voluptuous.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want coaches that have been somewhere. If you're having parenting challenges, you want coaches that have raised some children and some of them went right, some of them went left, but to be able to stay in it and pray through it is what you want. You want real live folks that have been through real stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. I think this concept of having community is so important, and thank you for saying that we don't need to get disappointed when it's time to change the network or the community. I remember reading that you can't really get to the next level with the same group that you're in today. Like everybody in your network is probably similar to you. So if you want to go to that next level, you have to kind of create a new network or learn from people who are at the level that you want to be at. So I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you say now is that people that are in your life, some of them will stay forever because we want those lifelong connections. And some of them really are for a season. And we mourn when we lose somebody. But at the end of the day, God does put people in our lives that we need and that we can bless as well.
And what I love about what you're saying is that make sure your village is diversified. You
Hmm.
know, we talk about diversity and oh, that word, but having a village that is diversified really gives you a rich understanding about what's really going on. You know, have people ethnically, generationally, all of those things engaged in your life, spiritually, whatever, because people, you know, and I say spiritually because some people may be seasoned saints, some folks may not be saints at all, as we would qualify them. But guess what? They will bring you wisdom and they'll say something and say, ooh, that hurt. They stepped on those toes
Hmm.
because especially non-believers will always challenge your belief. And if you're
Hmm.
not able to respond to that, it will have you seek God in a special way. So they sharpen
Absolutely.
you. They will, it's like, God, they said that. I don't like that they said that. You know, what are you trying to tell me about that? I'll give you an example. I have a very dear friend that I love who is agnostic, she'll say.
Mhm.
And she is Syrian and has real views about the conflict that has been happening with Israel and Palestine and everything else. This was in Exodus,
Okay.
where we're in Lamentations, where it talked about how it was the responsibility of I'll say the Israelites to be kind to their neighbors, to love them, to not go into war with them, to support them, the hungry and what have you. And so I'm reading this because what she's saying is kind of making me feel I don't yeah, I do know that God says about love and everything, but when you get the actual word that say this is how you're to treat these people, you say, yeah, they're not doing what they were told to do. And they were told to do it in the first five books, and we know the first five books is what the Hebrews use as their books,
The
and that's
Torah.
the beginning of ours. And so,
Yeah.
because of that, you're saying, wait a minute, it's not a Christian thing to love your neighbor. They were told to do that in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, it's those kinds of things when you have people in your life and you want to be able to say, guess what? Just like Christians often have some challenges with being like Christ,
Mhm.
here's the foundation. These Hebrews are having a challenge following what God told them to do. And
Absolutely.
what you're challenging them is to go back to what he said. And I know that those kinds of answers to somebody like her will open her heart because
Mm,
now we're giving truth, not culture, not rituals, but
right.
truth. And
Absolutely.
that's the thing that I love about quantum faith. It always goes back to the truth.
I love
Not
that.
what Lily believes, not what Andrea believes, but goes back to the truth. I did want to share something, taking the topic off just a little bit,
Okay.
and going back to something about recommendations. One of the most impactful books for me in this chapter was something called Atomic Habit.
Oh, yes.
And, and the reason why that was so impactful, thing about perfection and doing things just the right way and what have you. But Atomic Habit turned my limited beliefs on its head and
Right.
said, hey, start something, do it for a year, do it for 15 minutes, do it for 7 minutes. So right now, I'm doing Spanish. I've been talking about getting myself back into Spanish for 2 decades. And it was like, I don't have an hour, I don't have this, I need to take this class or whatever. I got Babbel and I'm doing it 15 minutes a day.
That's
And it's
awesome.
enough. It's enough. And I'm finding myself even doing it my way, starting to remember words. So the biggest thing that I would suggest is that book because it reminds someone that if you're starting a business and you keep on saying, oh, I'm still working, I don't have enough time to set up my business, 15 minutes a day. Get your list together. Oh, I need a website. Do your 15 minutes by the end of the week. Guess what? You'll have identified your domain name and what have you. And if you continue this by the end of this year, guess where you'll be? So
Wow.
it's that small chunks that we're not used to thinking in that realm, but they do add up.
That works right along with what I teach about being in flow, right? So this culture that we're in tells us we have to get everything fast. We have to do everything in such a big way. But if you bite off little chunks and just take your time, you ultimately get there and then you don't get stressed out in the process. And so just this whole concept of creating these habits and being consistent and being in flow, I think is just so important. Since we're talking about books, I did remember the name of the book that I was trying to think of before, and it's a classic. It's Think and Grow Rich. That's the book that I
Mhm.
was trying to reference before, where, he went and sought out someone who was at the level that he wanted to be at. And you learn from people who are at a higher level. So I just wanted to bring that back forward. Okay. Is there
And that
anything?
and what I love about that is when you talk to them, oftentimes they're very transparent. One of the things I constantly tell people, there's no such thing as an overnight success.
Oh my
We
gosh.
that is such a lie from the pits of hell. That's the best way I can say
Yes.
it. And when
Yes.
they're transparent with it, sometimes they have gone to bankruptcy 6 and 7 times. They've been out on the street not knowing where they're going to go. It's just all of these stories, and you want to believe that it just happened because you're looking at where they are. I mean, this is the challenge that we have. You want the glory, but you don't want the story.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, and I think it was Dave Ramsey. I once heard him talk about how he used to do his programs and nobody would show up. And then Oprah called, and then this one called, and he finally showed up in the big arena, and people were like, "Oh, he came out of nowhere. He's an overnight success." And he said, "It took me 20 years to become an overnight success." And so we got to put in the work. I do want to say, though, that if we carry it all on our own, it does feel like work. But if we allow God to direct us and guide us in the way that He would have us to go, I feel like the work is less. He says that his burden is like, so we need to cast our cares on Him and let Him do the work. And this hustle culture that we're in, I'm going to tell you, I am very guilty of it. I did the whole hustle culture the whole time that I was working for somebody else. And I decided this time, I'm not doing that. God called me into this where He has vision, where He gives you a vision, He makes provision. And I'm ready to just do what He's called me to do. Want to ask you, Lily, is there anything else you want to share with our audience about your journey, about your work, about quantum, about maybe even how they can learn more about you?
Okay, so what I want to say is another example of God showing up, showing off, and disturbing me. Disturbing me. So I had mentioned to several folks that I had over 500 blogs and I was going to do some kind of devotional book and create these, just kind of brush off the blogs and make it a devotional book. And so when I finished the quantum faith presentations at the AI conference at HBCU in Houston, Tillis, their AI conference in April, with everybody coming up and just giving me, just raising questions and just really, just I'll say eating it up. I was really amazed. And so I was working on finishing the devotional book. And so I was like, after that was over early April, 2 weeks later, I was almost done with it. I was up to say page 290 and I was excited. And I called my sister and told her, "Oh, I've brushed off the blogs. I got my devotional book ready to go." And she said, "Oh, you're doing a quantum devotional?" I said, "No." "Well, that's the book people want." I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
and it's like, "But I'm almost done, God. I have a week and I'll be done." And my sister Valerie said, "Well, do you want to be done or do you want, what God wants you to do?" That quantum faith in what you're saying is people are hungry for that. And so I had to put it down and begin again because I knew it was the right thing. Now, did it disturb me? Yes, because I thought I was almost done. And there are too many places in the Bible that we see where we as humans believe we're finished. We're close to the end. Why are you telling us to turn this way or turn that way? This is what happens. This is what happens when you let people in your village and share what's going on. You will immediately know the truth about what they're saying.
Mhm.
And I declare that over each of you, that you immediately know if it's something for you to change or whether you just cast it to the side and that's their opinion. As soon as she said that, the level of being kind of upset was so high. I knew this is what I was supposed to do. So this year, I'm working on it right now. My quantum faith devotional, I'm still working on the name. 365 days. I was trying to get it around 120, and then that was another, like, you need to do the 365. But it has all kinds of entanglement, what it means teleportation, what it means about the light. It just all kinds of kernels that will allow, especially folks that are in the science, the STEM arena, to resonate with this because they're going to be like, This was always there. The biggest thing I want to tell people is that I look at this as being told the world was flat, and now you're finding out the world is round. That's what quantum does to science and bringing it into what Christ said. Finding out when you are pushed into what Christ wants you to understand, that you find out the world is really round. And that's what will happen.
You know, Lily, I think what we can expect from you, and I've read your past book, what we can expect from you is to take this quantum process that seems mind-bending to some of us because we're not in the STEM field, we're not in the sciences, and you're going to break it down in a way that we can apply our faith to it and we can understand, oh, so when God says, speak it into existence, this is what it
Mhm.
really was. One of the things that came to mind just now, there is a passage in the Bible where Jesus is on one side of the shore and then he just ends up on the other side of the shore. He teleported, right? And so we don't talk about that a whole lot. We don't really make the connections between the spiritual or the Christian and the science. But what I'm hearing that we're going to get from you in this devotional is this marriage between the two. And I can't wait to hear about it. I can't wait to read it.
And all of this, speaking to the rock and the water and then hitting the rock, all of those are different aspects of quantum. So this is the exciting part. It's like this always existed. We're just beginning to understand it. So
We're
that's
living
what I
at a time when this
Mhm.
can be understood. I don't think our parents, our grandparents, and maybe before they couldn't understand it because the things that are happening in our realm, like an iPhone, for example, like our parents, great grandparents would have thought, what kind of witchcraft is that, right? But now we're living in a time when those things make sense to us. So it's time. And you're going to
and to
be
stay,
one of the
yeah,
people who shepherd us that way. I love that.
and stay curious. Stay curious. Question. I think some of that is really lost. You know, you when you're 6 and 7 years old, it's like questioning everything. How does this work? How to understand this? It is all right to question and to wait for the answers. And that is a powerful role as these budding CEOs that I look at. They're powerful. They question things. They question, wait a minute, how can I use AI to support my vision? They're questioning, what do I need to know in order to take the next step? Questioning is what God wants us to do. He wants us to question and then wait for his answer.
Awesome. Lily, how can people find out more about you and your work?
I am revamping my website, but it's lilyspeaks.com, and that really bridges the science and faith.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, Lily. Well, for me, this has just been an awesome time getting to talk to you, learning more about what you're doing, hearing a little bit about quantum faith and how that is impacting your work. And I look forward to other opportunities to talk to you. And if you'd like to reach out to Lily again, her website is lilyspeaks.com. And we look forward to hearing more from you, Lily. Have a wonderful
Thank
day
you.
and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you.